Hello, Bucs fans, and welcome into another episode of Hear the Cannons. I am Colin Hallboom, the host of this show, and I'm joined by our lead editor over at BucsGameday, River Wells. And we're going to talk about Myles Garrett, who you see in the picture if you're watching on YouTube. And we're going to talk about some other options the Buccaneers have. It's been a busy offseason already for Tampa Bay. And there's a number of topics we want to discuss on both the player personnel and the coaching side. And we're going to start off with our question of the week. But before we do that, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And please make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel at BucsGameday. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. And most important of all, make sure you're checking out BucsGameday.com because that is Sports Illustrated's only website dedicated specifically to covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
And we work there, so it's cool.
Yes, and we work there. Helps us out. So if you like us, that helps too. Question of the week for you, Riv. Is it time for the Buccaneers to go all in? We saw them transition from the Tom Brady era into this Baker Mayfield era. The Bucs front office uncharacteristically kind of put all their chips on the table, pulled money from future years, kicked it down the can, as people say. And the way that they managed to overcome that situation and transition into this current era while making the playoffs every single year has been quite remarkable. And
for sure,
now it's like that cyclical point where they're now looking towards a healthy cap situation. They've got a really nice complement of, young talent and proven veterans, continuity at key spots. Is this the time for them to go all in and start spending some money, maybe in free agency? Of course, they'll do their best in the draft, but maybe make a trade or two, and we'll talk about that. What are your thoughts on that big question?
This is a really good question, actually, and I think a lot of it comes with how much you believe in the Buccaneers to develop the talent that they already have. And there's a lot of young talent there. You got guys on defense like Yaya Diaby and Chris Braswell and Tyke Smith and Zion McCollum and et cetera, et cetera. And on offense, Bucky Irving was fantastic this year and Jalen McMillan, all that. And that's a really strong core. And naturally, once you have a strong core, you want to take the next step and then go all in with some additional veterans, which, that's definitely the right way of thinking. I don't know. I think Tampa Bay's defense has a lot of questions surrounding it. Which we'll talk about definitely in a little bit. The offense looked really good last year, top 5 offense. I mean, that's great, actually. But with Grizzard, who will bring a little bit of Liam Cohen flair to the offense still being in-house, I think the question remains on whether or not he's going to be able to field a top 5 offense. I think I would have questioned if Liam Cohen could do that twice in a row, seeing how hard that is. Will Baker Mayfield have another, good year? And there's still a lot of questions with this team, I think. When you have that many questions, the question on whether you should go all in, I think, is tough to answer because there's just some things I want to see this Bucs team do, and I don't know if this team's framework is quite ready to just stack a bunch of stuff on top of it and get ready to go. But I'd like to hear what you think, Colin, because I think there's a lot of arguments maybe for that case, given how well Jason Licht is drafted in recent years.
Yeah, and I'm not when I say go all in, I'm not necessarily advocating for the team to borrow a ton of money from future years and extend themselves beyond being the shrewd thinking.
Like a certain other team in the NFC South, maybe?
Yeah, definitely not like the New Orleans Saints. No, thank you. They're going to be in purgatory for a long time, I think, because of
probably.
Yeah. But you know what? I do think it's time for the Bucs to really go for it, River. I think you got Baker Mayfield at that perfect sweet spot of his career where he's found a new home. He's finally found a place where he's embraced and able to be the best version of himself as a quarterback and a person, you could argue. And, they've got all the, like Mike Evans, how much longer is he going to be around? Guy was 4th overall in touchdowns last year, his 11th consecutive 1,000-yard season. The whole
1 year left on his deal, right?
Yeah. 1 year left on his deal. Yeah. Same with Baker, right? Technically.
Yeah. There's an out there, yeah.
And like I'm really hopeful and optimistic that they bring back Godwin. So just thinking of the age of those guys and where they're at, this O-line is ascending big time after last year, yet still really young. But more importantly is I believe the NFC is kind of ripe for the taking. Like, you got the Lions, Eagles, Commanders on the upswing. Yep. The Niners, you never know what you're going to get. The Packers look like a real team.
Maybe the
However,
Vikings, maybe.
potentially, I mean, they can be playing with a rookie quarterback next year.
They
It
will
looks
be.
like so.
I think
You
so.
know, I think it's the perfect time to strike while the iron's hot in terms of the NFC. And I mean, you know, you got the Ravens, the Bengals, the Chiefs, like all these teams over in the AFC, and the Bucs have just been afforded the luxury of being in the NFC, where you don't necessarily have those same juggernauts. The Bucs beat the Lions and the Eagles this year, not at their best, and the Commanders. Like those are you know, some of the top teams. So I think it is time to go all in. That's what I think. Yeah, I do.
I think that's not a bad take. I mean, there's a lot there, you know, to warrant that.
Yeah, so. and there's a number of ways that you can go all in, of course, and one of those recently is huge because it lines up with a need, which is Myles Garrett requesting a trade from the Cleveland Browns. It's a funny situation in the sense that, and other people have said this, so I'm not taking credit for the observation, but so often when we see in this player empowerment era in all professional sports, you see a star player request a trade and everyone's like, screw that guy, you know, you sign here. But everyone is like more on Myles Garrett's side, it feels like, because he's been just such a class act, worked so hard. And it's kind of like, okay, like, yeah, I don't blame you, Myles. I'm impressed you stuck it out this long, especially with what the Browns did with Deshaun Watson. But so Myles Garrett, I mean, Bucs fans had to be salivating when they read that release that he sent out publicly expressing a trade. That being said, he hits an obvious need. He's the best edge rusher in football as far as I'm concerned, an absolute game wrecker. I
think most tackles would agree with you.
Yeah. And but it would, like, there's going all in, and then there's, you know, mortgaging the future, and that's going to take likely a couple firsts, man. Potential. I mean, that's debatable, but it's going to take a significant amount of draft capital and then a significant financial investment. Like, he's going to, you know, he wants to win, that's for sure, and he said as much, but he's also looking to get paid, and he deserves to get paid. Do you think Myles Garrett is worth the Bucs putting their full court press on here and making a full-fledged offer to acquire his services to bolster a major weakness on this Todd Bowles-led defense?
Well, I will talk about this kind of and compartmentalize it, I should say. And I think and this is a good point here from Charles Williams that I'm just going to bring up. Jason Light loves draft picks. He likes taking those draft picks and he likes turning them into young players that he can add on his team. And that's worked in a lot of instances, right? You know, you get some solid play from Tyke Smith. Graham Barton played very well. Bucky Irving was phenomenal. So those type of draft picks, you know, can develop into great players. Look at the edge rushers that Tampa Bay has had, and look at the young edge rushers Tampa Bay has had. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Yaya Diaby, guys like Anthony Nelson have been good rotational players, right? I think fans should start to question why some of these guys, these younger players, and maybe some of these younger draft picks, like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and Yaya Diaby, and then of course it's too early to tell with him, but Chris Braswell, you know, got drafted as well. Didn't do much this year, but if you want to draft these raw, talented edge rushers that have a huge amount of upside, and I see a lot of Bucs mocks with like Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, a lot of those similar type of guys, they have to develop, right? To take that next step from point A to point B. And I think it's fair to wonder when that's going to happen for any of these guys, these raw edge rushers that Jason Light has drafted. And I think given that information, how guys like JTS, guys like Chris Braswell, guys like Diaby had a good solid year this year, but you know there were 4 players that had more sacks than him leading the edge rushers in sacks. And you can't be a high pressure guy, can't get to the quarterback guy forever, right?
Sorry to cut you off. I just want to say, I think it's a pathetic level of production from the edge rusher group.
Yeah,
it's like at that point, like it's that bad. We're being too gentle on them. Like those edge rushers need to produce. Arr.
Yeah, and I think my point being, you have to wonder at what point do we question the development of that edge rushing group? So you can either keep drafting these high ceiling athletic freaks at edge rusher and perhaps with, you know, not as good coaching and management, just see them never develop, or you could spend 2 first-round picks and get Myles Garrett, who has the pass rushing moves, who has the speed that you need, who is a physical freak already, who has the production, 14 sacks in 2023 and 2024. So I think that's definitely worth wanting. And if you can make it work money-wise, which most contenders would be able to make it work money-wise with a bunch of shuffling around, but he's going to be expensive. And you can spend those picks, then what's to Tampa Bay? You can get another JTS or Diaby or Braswell. And again, too early as hell on some of those guys for sure. But or you can get a guy that's already developed and already there. And I think if you are serious, and you think you can win a Super Bowl next year, so you have it in your head that this is something that you can do with these pieces, then yeah, go get Myles Garrett. Because if you have the capital and you're willing to put it up, that's already a proven commodity. And that's the type of ideas that, the Los Angeles Rams have when they make their trades, the Rams have a specific saying about trading draft picks for proven talent that we can't say on air. But
which is kind of funny because they've completely revamped their D-line with phenomenal drafting.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. They're really good at drafting, so they can say that.
Yeah.
Jared Verse, all those guys, Fisk. But for the Bucs, I think even if it's not Garrett, I think clearly some of their edge rushing development's not working. And either they need to get a new coach in that instance to coach those guys. They need to figure out something else otherwise.
They just did get a new coach, did they not?
They did on the defensive line. Yeah. Charlie Strong.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. Now, George Edwards is still the outside linebackers coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as far as we know. And that's something Todd Bowles did mention he's going to look at his staff and, evaluate them in the offseason. Perhaps that's going to be a place where that gets evaluated. But if it's not Myles Garrett, and it could be, but if it's not, anyone else there who's a proven commodity who doesn't need to learn pass rushing moves, which some of these guys in Tampa Bay aren't learning new pass rushing moves. Guys who are speed rushers and power rushers already, guys who have that already set. Maybe that's what this team needs.
Yeah, and we'll talk about another name as well in a second. But River, your point about potentially like the lack of development for some of these guys can't all be blamed on the players. Maybe there's an issue with how it's being done.
I actually think, to be honest with you, I think that's more. It's just an opinion, obviously. I think that's more so the issue than the players themselves. Yeah,
it's either that or the front office can't identify the right talent at those positions. There's got to be something's got to give. But could it have something to do? Could the lack of production for this position also, and this falls right under the umbrella of what you're discussing, Todd Bowles' tendency to try to manufacture pressure in unorthodox, like running so many games and having his edge rushers drop back into coverage, whether it's Anthony Nelson, whether it's Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who's done that a lot, Braswell, who struggled trying to do that because it's a lot for an edge rusher to come into an NFL system, try and learn how to be disciplined and fundamental and beat, NFL tackles, yet at the same time be asked to drop into coverage to try and throw a quarterback off because Todd Bowles wants to send, Tyke Smith or Antoine Winfield. It's so much to ask for young guys. I wonder if their heads are spinning.
It is.
And I wonder if it puts them in the best position to be successful. And this year didn't work for the defense overall, so you can't use that excuse.
And I'll shout out Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report, who does fantastic work, as Bucs fans know. But some stats from him here: 571 pass plays Diaby was on the field for. He dropped into coverage 17.3% of the time.
Wow.
Anthony Nelson 22.9% of the time. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka 24.5% of the time. That's
a quarter of the time JTS is playing coverage. So he's a quarter. He's a quarter of a cornerback. Then
and if you look at Diaby, here, 10 out of 10 passes, 105 yards during the season. Bucs fans might remember the first play of the game against Atlanta when they were in Atlanta. Diaby was on Drake London and let up a huge flash completion. So at some point, I would agree. At some point, you're not using them as edge rushers, right? And I get there were injuries, and it was clear that the team didn't trust their middle linebackers to cover the middle of the field quite as well, because you had KJ Britt, who struggled with it and may not be back next year. And Levante David's a fantastic instinctual player, but he's slowing down, right? So the solution might not have been to have your edge rushers drop back into coverage a quarter of the time they were on the field passing downs. Yeah, I agree.
It's unbelievable.
Sure.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. Now, we talked about Myles Garrett, and he's, I guess, the prize of the ball, if you will. But another guy who is very intriguing and has been talked about plenty, so I'm sure Bucs fans have already gone down this rabbit hole as well, is Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals. Incredibly durable, incredibly productive. So he's only missed 3 games in his 4 seasons in Cincinnati. He's got 35 sacks over the past 2 seasons, 17 and a half each year.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, and he's entering the last year of his deal, and he wants to get paid. And the Bucs the Bucs can barely crack like 17 and a half from their entire edge rushing group. I don't even think they can. And then you got Trey Hendrickson here getting 17 and a half 2 years in a row on his own.
Himself.
And imagine
17 and a half's a lot, right? But you just need a guy, if you can get a guy who can do 10, 9 and a half. I mean, that's so much better than what you have right now. So much better than
17 and a half is a lot, but it's just stupid when you do it 2 years in a row. Like we saw Shaq Barrett have that prolific season, but like you know that's not easy to do. Like it's quite easily be a fluke. Trey Hendrickson's 30 years old. Like he just turned 30. So
for any basketball fans out there, real quick break, Jimmy Butler just got traded to the Golden State Warriors. So
whoa,
that's fun. Yeah.
No way.
Continue. Yeah.
I'm a basketball fan, so I appreciate it. Good luck with that one.
For Andrew Wiggins, Dennis Schroeder, Kyle Anderson, and a protected first-round pick. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's very interesting. I guess they're not giving up a ton to get Jimmy Butler, but have fun with that one. I feel like he's been a bit of a headache, but we don't need to talk hoops too much.
Of course.
I miss talking hoops. So Trey Hendrickson, a lot of people think first off, because he is, well, I guess it could be a rental, could not. They would want to make sure that they were willing to extend him before they give up draft capital. First off, we don't even know if he's available technically, like if the Bengals would entertain it, but they're going to have to pay Jamar Chase. They just gave Joe Burrow a boatload of money. So that team, there is a legitimate possibility that they would be willing to entertain trade offers for Trey Hendrickson, try and allocate those financial resources elsewhere. These two teams could be a match made in heaven to get something done. And he would take significantly less, though, because he's on that last year of his deal, than a Myles Garrett. More sack production this past year. I mean, how's the fit with a guy like Trey Hendrickson? Is that even more up the Bucs alley potentially? Like, what do you think about that compared to the Myles Garrett discussion we just had, River?
Well, he'll be cheaper, and he had 17 and a half sacks, like he mentioned. So fit wise, you'll find a way to mix one like that fit if you can get him in there. And I mean, the Bucs need someone to be able to put up these numbers. And when you look back to the teams they had, like the Brady years, you had Pierre Paul and a prime Barrett kind of on either end. And a Todd Bowles defense, I think, kind of relies on that pressure, right? And you've mentioned a lot of various blitzing from defensive backs, and they're rushing 5, but who's the 5th is kind of a big part of Todd Bowles' thing. But in order to play that rally to the ball zone that he likes to play, you need to have a good pass rush. And I think it was a huge detriment to the defense. Sure, they didn't have any, especially when you're not able to cover up the middle. A lot of those plays probably happen because there's just too much time to find people there. And to get a splash like Henderson would be huge, or really just to try and find someone on the market. Because like I said, at some point, these edge rushers that you're drafting, these projects, maybe aren't projecting
time
the way that you want. Yeah.
I think it's time for a sure thing. And I think Bucs fans would echo that underlying theme of our discussion thus far, and that is they need a sure thing. They need a proven product. And if that guy can't get home, then we really do know Bowles is the problem, and he needs to change his scheme. Because if you get a guy like Trey Hendrickson or Myles Garrett in here, you got to let them pin their ears back and go. You can't be playing these gimmicky games anymore. So is he capable of adjusting his scheme to fit the personnel he has available would be something we would also find out. It's worth mentioning there's also free agency options. If the Bucs are too skeptical, Jason Light doesn't want to send assets out to bring someone in. I mean, Khalil Mack is a name, Josh Sweat in Philadelphia, Hassan Reddick in Philadelphia. Yeah. couple guys. Sorry, Hassan Reddick, New York Jets. I'm all confused because I never know where he's playing. But
should he decide to play for you, Hassan Reddick?
Yeah, well,
The,
I'll tell you right now, I'm going to take Hassan Reddick's name off the list because a guy like who's held out so recently and been so willing to do that is not a Jason Light guy. I don't think. Like,
and I would also mention too, Khalil Mack had 6 sacks last year, which is okay. But the year before that, in 2023, he had 17 with the Chargers.
Dude,
so he still has the ability, I think, to kind of give you that high motor, even in his old age. And this is a guy that's probably going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. So that wouldn't be a bad get, and it's probably going to be cheap.
Yeah, he'd also be very helpful to those young pass rushers we talked about, whether or not JTS is around, but like for a Chris Braswell and a Yaya Diaby, he'd be a great mentor for Diaby, specifically. 33 years old, about to turn 34.
Defensive Player of the Year, 4-time first-team All-Pro. I mean, people, you talk about Hoff debates. I mean, all-decade team, people talk about Khalil Mack like that, I mean,
dude, give me Khalil Mack. You kidding me? Like, absolutely, I would sign up for that. Now this I think leads us nicely into another conversation I want to have, because there are several positions on the Bucs roster that need upgrading, and most of those positions are on the defensive side of the ball. You could argue all of them are
100%. Yeah,
like it's like I'm hoping this is one of those drafts where where Jason Light just doesn't hide his cards and he just loads up on the defensive side of the ball.
To be honest with you, I don't know what position on defense they don't need.
That's a really
maybe the interior defensive line, but
Yeah.
I mean, edge rusher, corner, safety, middle linebacker. You need all those guys.
Whether it's an injection of talent or just they need depth options, which we saw this year, they certainly do need to add pieces to every level. That's a great point. Now, some of those, obviously edge rusher, we've talked about that. Inside linebacker is a huge one because you have
big time
potentially looking for 2 starters there, depending on what happens with Levante. Cornerback, need more. Safety, we need a safety. The Jordan Whitehead experiment has not worked, even though at first everyone was so excited. His play was not up to snub. And then,
for sure,
of course, the neck injury at the end of the year, things are not trending in the right direction there. Who knows what could happen? They might just cut him. He might retire. You never know. And then on offense, team could use a left guard, depending what you think of Ben Bredesen. So those are just some of the positions. River, is one more important than the other, or is it just like best available at any of those positions? But I am curious to get your assessment of which is the most pressing.
Definitely edge rusher, I think, and for sure. And then probably corner, and corner's intriguing. Because we'll talk a little bit about this maybe in depth going forward. But you've got Jamel Dean, who has been injured all throughout this year. Plays well when he's playing. Couldn't stay on the field this year. But if you're Jason Light, I mean, you arguably traded your best corner away before the season started. And then you ran into a bunch of depth issues at cornerback. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes with Dean, because is that going to spook Jason Light in the front office? Maybe we'll have to see, because in theory, getting some new blood in there with McCollum looking as good as he did would be pretty solid. You can get a guy in the draft. There's a lot of corners that I've seen pop up in mock drafts around the league, but at the same time, do you want to make that same mistake and potentially be right back where you started? So corner is going to be, I think, maybe not the most pressing position, but the most interesting to watch this offseason to see where the Bucs go with corner. And then inside linebacker, man, a Bulls defense like this needs a really good inside linebacker who can cover every blade of grass. Servassier Dennis looked like he was good at doing that on 3 downs. He hurt his shoulder. He hasn't been healthy for 2 years.
Such a small sample size with him. I was excited when I saw, but he can't stay on the field.
Exactly. So if he can this year, that's good. But can he? And if he can't, that's another free agency potential thing you look at. So another, second round, third round might be a really good time to try and pick up an inside linebacker who's rangy. who you think has those skills. So for me, I think it's all on defense. I think defense is the biggest thing. I mean, the fact that the Bucs are top 5 offense in an offensive-driven league last year and finished 10-7 and got bounced in the wild card rounds, not amazing. I think. Look, and it be that personnel or coaching, it's defense.
Yeah, with a defensive expert head coach.
Yeah,
so bizarre. We have a really cool, like David Zussman here, watching on YouTube, kind of lays out his battle plan. He said the sure thing is depth and not investing all future to get an alpha pass rusher. So he doesn't like the idea of that. It could get injured, end up not even helping the team. He's talking Hendrickson, Crosby, Garrett, all command 25+ million. And then he goes on to say, here's what I would do. And he says, I would trade for Nick Herbig with the Steelers, good player, for Jamel Dean or Jamel Dean plus a future third. We don't know what the league views on Jamel Dean in that contract, but I see where you're going at here. That's a reasonable idea. Sign Chase Young and Baron Browning and Shaq Barrett, bring him back in free agency, and then would sign Murphy Jr. to sub Dean. I like Byron Murphy Jr. coming over from Minnesota. He had a great year. I have a feeling they might want to keep him around in Minnesota, but he is a free agent. So it's an interesting.
Nick Herbig's pretty good too. Doesn't get as many of the Lions shared snaps in Pittsburgh, but definitely when he does have those snaps, he impresses. So wouldn't be a bad idea either. There's going to be a lot of those. And remember, that's what Shaq Barrett was. Shaq Barrett was in a similar situation in Denver under Von Miller. And once he had the ability to be a starting edge rusher, he flourished in Tampa Bay. So that's always an option to take a look at some guys who have NFL game tape, who don't maybe get as many snaps, and go, okay, how many of these guys could possibly take over a bigger role and be able to flourish? And maybe someone like Herbig could be that guy, maybe not. But I think I like the thought process. I do.
Yeah, I think it's that, and that's more up Jason Light's alley, really, with how he's operated over the course of his career. So like more calculated, trying to identify value certain places. So good suggestions there from David. If you are not all for going for a big splashy signing due to the risk. A couple other things, River, I want to hit on.
Let's hit on them.
While I got you here, man. What I consider to be pretty significant news, big news for the Bucs, is Mike Greenberg, the Bucs secret, not so secret weapon anymore, assistant general manager. Of course, he's been with Tampa since before Jason Light was here. He's going into his 16th season in the Bucs front office, known as the capologist, the cap expert. He's been very much a pioneer in terms of, we mentioned earlier, the Bucs being so tidy and shrewd with their money. That's all from Mike Greenberg. So his value cannot be understated when it comes to this front office. Jason Light knows that. Jacksonville, to the surprise of no one, had requested to interview him for their vacant general manager position, which would be a huge career step, of course, for Mike Greenberg. With the Bucs having just lost John Spytek, felt like the sky might have been falling, I think, for some Bucs fans. However, lo and behold, unlike Liam Cohen, he withdrew his name, and it appears he is actually withdrawing his name, and he's not going to.
Let's say Liam Cohen did in fact withdraw his name.
That's right. That's right. So, how big is that?
Make sure he signs that contract. Make sure to look at him, have the pen in his hand. That's big. I think the Bucs' ability to play the cap has been pretty integral to their success, and in a smart way, not necessarily in a New Orleans Saints way. Which again, if the Saints had won a Super Bowl, we wouldn't be saying it wasn't a smart way, but they didn't. So it's more manageable. Yeah, it's more manageable. There was a team in the way actually in 2020. More manageable for sure. And to get that bounce back from the Brady era, got a lot of dead cap from players that are retired too. A lot of that's Greenberg and what he's able to do. And if you can lose Spytek, which you don't want to lose Spytek, because he's been a phenomenal part of the draft process and scouting. Now he's in Las Vegas with Tom Brady and the Raiders. It's integral to keep one of those guys. And at the same time, having someone there for longer can only help prime the other people that are coming in once Greenberg will probably inevitably be gone as a general manager. So I think big get for the Bucs. Jason Light's probably very happy, and it's going to allow them to maybe do some things this offseason that Greenberg's good at, which is managing the cap around, getting contracts in order, and maybe making one of these flash signings with the right amount of money. So,
Green will find a way to make it work. And I John Spytek, man, I love that dude. He was awesome, and I wish him nothing but the best with Tom Brady.
Spytek's pretty cool.
And everyone over with the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, Josh Grizzard, Grizz as they call him in the building.
Yes.
He has been upgraded to offensive coordinator. If you subscribe, follow, and pay attention to what we do here at Bucs Game Day, you know we've
Hit
already
that
talked about
bell,
it.
smash that like button.
Yeah, and do that too. But you also have already heard River and Caleb Skinner, our other writer at Bucs Game Day, talk about the arrangement that Josh Grizzard has to become the Bucs' new OC to replace Liam Cohen. What can fans expect? I just want to hit on it briefly, River. What can they expect with Grizzard designing the offense and calling plays for the first time? Some continuity, but at the same time, it's a different guy calling the shots. So, what can we expect?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit with Caleb, but I am curious to see what unique aspect Grizzard brings. And we're going to talk to him tomorrow, actually, at One Buck Play. So stick around on Bucs Game Day to get more updates from what he says. I'll be posting video and quotes on my Twitter down below. So check that out. Really, he comes from, the Dolphins, and he was under Mike McDaniel for a little bit. And so there's a lot of wild motion and speed on that offense. Maybe more so the dials turned up a little bit from the typical Shanahan-McVay offense. So whether or not he brings a little bit of a Miami flair will be interesting to see. But I think a lot of it's probably going to be pretty similar. Looking under Cohen, knowing what worked not only in general, play calling wise, but what worked for this Bucs offense. Looking at the personnel that they had, Cohen's ability to go from a zone run blocking scheme, transitioning to a gap when he found that was working, that sort of malleability is something that Grizzard's going to have to be able to have if he still wants to maintain a top 10 offense in this league and become a top offensive coordinator. And potentially, like every single person who ever takes this job becomes a head coach, maybe. So we'll see what happens there. But really, I think you can expect some similarities to Liam Cohen's offense, but I'm excited to see what unique little flares he brings, and maybe we can look to Miami to see if there's going to be a little bit of that at snap motion that I treasure so much. A little bit more of that sprinkled in there.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about the malleability or flexibility, what have you, of Liam Cohen. Yeah. I mean, that's what made him so great. So people can
100%.
People can think all they want. Oh, you're going to run the same system. Everything will just, you just plug it in and it's going to continue to operate like a well-oiled machine. I don't think so. And I think Liam Cohen's ability to change on a week-to-week basis based on matchups, based on what he thinks working, like changing the entire run scheme, which was a wise decision. Obviously, the Bucs catapulted up into becoming a top rushing team. Like that decisions like that are how that happens and how that young O-line can flourish and how Bucky Irving can have a breakout season as a rookie, all that stuff. So you have to be able to change your approach as you go, make decisions on the fly and be flexible. So hopefully Grizz has that. Because if he does, then we can expect a lot of similar success. But like you said earlier in the show, man, top 5 group, that's going to be hard to replicate. So don't necessarily expect them to be a top team right away. Let this guy get his feet wet. And as long as if the defense is better, the offense doesn't have to be so good. So you don't like to be imbalanced. I'd rather a little more balance between those two phases of the game. On that note, River, I think we are going to head on out of here. I want to thank all of our viewers on YouTube, anyone who's listening on whatever streaming platform you prefer. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure to check us out on YouTube, subscribe, and make sure you're checking out BucsGameday.com, Sports Illustrated's only site covering the Bucs. We're pumping out content all the time. River and our other editors are doing an amazing job making sure that material is getting out to you. So until next time, folks, thanks for joining, and go Bucs.